Like, I hope a miracle happens, you know what I'm saying? I hope it's, all I wish is to free my father from up under this enslavement and spare his life.
What would you say to the Supreme Court if you had the opportunity to testify on behalf of your dad?
I would try to make them see that this is a murder on their behalf, and this is
Yeah.
wrong, you know? And I believe my father is truly innocent, and they need to take a closer look.
Have you allowed yourself to even get to Tuesday right now?
Yeah, I already put it inside my body that I would be a witness to the execution. I'm gonna stand there firm and show my dad he's not alone if that's what it comes to, and I'm ready for it. My mindset, my spirit, strong. Like, I'm doing this for my dad. It's bigger than me. So for me to be there in that time, if it comes to that, it's like an honor where I'm gonna see him off. So if this is the way that he going out, we already made peace.
That innocent brother at that, right?
Yesterday, a black man was lynched. Peace, peace, peace. I am Dr. Philip Roundtree, and you are tuned into Rhetorically Speaking. Man, it's a heavy day. It's a heavy day. Yesterday, we watched Marcellus Williams Sr. be murdered, and make sure we use the correct language. We watched Marcellus Williams be murdered by the state of Missouri, by the U.S. government. It's a heavy day, man. It's a heavy day. But we're going to try to get through it. We're going to try to get through it. We're going to work through it. Like, black folk have always been resilient. We've been forced to be resilient since the beginning of time, especially since we've been here in this settler colony known as America.
Yeah.
As I try to process and understand what took place yesterday and what will happen today and what will happen tomorrow, I am joined by my homegirl, Proof of Consciousness, which is such an apt name in this moment in time. Also goes by POC. How you feeling?
What's good? Good morning. Yep. You already know what time it is, man. Phil, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you again for your patience with me this morning. But I feel like I wish the state of Missouri had some patience with Marcellus, to actually hear um, hundreds of thousands of people's outcry to save this man's life, this innocent man's life. You know what I mean? To be sitting on death row for over 2 decades and for it to come down like this with new evidence to show and to prove that he's continuously innocent. Like you said, Phil, I don't think we're in a new day. I think we're in the same time. It's just, it's revealing itself over and over that devil continues to show up just in new forms as we really show true colors here in America. We're in an election season right now. And I want to know what both candidates have to say about the state of Missouri making this decision. Honestly, truly, I haven't really heard too much about it from either candidate, in my opinion. But I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little later. But I do want to just focus in on the fact that when you think about states like southern states, specifically southern states like Missouri, and then still making the conscious effort to lynch not just black people, but in general having the idea that lynching is still okay in 2024, it's just very telling. It's very, very, very telling for a southern state like Missouri.
Agreed, and appreciate those of you who are tuning in on YouTube. If you want to join the show, tinyurl.com/pocket.guest. You can come on the screen. You can offer your thoughts. That also goes for the folk who are watching on Instagram Live and Facebook Live. We definitely want to hear your comments with regards to just the various topics we're talking about today, but
Yeah.
specifically Marcellus Williams. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Marcellus Williams, I had no idea who Marcellus Williams was about a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's this brother who this ancestor now, this who many may consider a martyr at the expense of the state. Right? He was a brother who was executed yesterday, September 24th, 2024. He was alleged to and convicted for the murder of a former reporter, Felicia Gale, who was stabbed to death in her home. He was arrested and charged in 2001. Now, this is where things start to get extremely murky. There was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. They had testimony from an informant and his ex-girlfriend. This is where it starts to get fuzzy. We start to see ulterior motives. There was a $10,000 reward, and some folk thought that might have played into the ex-girlfriend potentially linking him to the crime. Both of them were considered convicted felons when we're talking about the informant and the ex-girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
He was sentenced to death in 2003. In 2015, 12 years later, being on death row, there was new DNA testing on the murder weapon, on the knife that killed Felicia Gale, and it said it did not match Marcellus Williams.
Mm-hmm.
You think that would be enough, right? The DNA. We've watched Law and Order. We've watched Dateline. We've watched Snapped. We've watched so many of these shows where it says if there's no DNA match, then what are we doing here? How did we get to this point where he is convicted? Well, we know why. Because 11 of the 12 jurors were white, number one.
Yeah.
As POC just talked about, we're talking about the South and the Midwest. We're talking about red states where a black man is not only just a black man, but black folk in general, or brown folk, let alone, will have a jury of their peers, whatever that means, right? So we know you're guilty until proven innocent in these states. More telling, in 2017, the victim's family called for a stay of execution. Her husband had doubts that he was guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Other family members have doubts that he is guilty. But yet and still at that time, prosecutors pushed forward for the execution despite the new evidence with regards to the DNA. He did receive a stay of execution from former Governor Eric Greitens, who appointed a special board of inquiry. And this is where the ongoing legal battles persisted. Now, recently, you had the governor. I don't even want to say his name.
Yeah.
Right. He looked at the case, right, and said, oh, no, we're going to keep the party going. So he's not going to offer it. He didn't offer a stay of execution. It went to the Missouri Supreme Court. They said, nah, we're going to keep the party going.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. Supreme Court didn't really offer an opinion formally.
Nor an explanation.
The Democratic justices that are in place said, yeah, we probably would have said, ask for a stay. Just considering what's taking place. Again, yesterday, a black man, another black man, and there's going to be another one today, tomorrow, and henceforth was executed by the state. So when you learned about this case, POC, what was your initial thoughts, like your visceral reaction to what was taking place?
For me, I love history, right? So when I figured out that this was like a story that was 2 decades old, I started to do my research to figure out how is this man continuously sitting on death row knowing that he's innocent, and you have all of these new factual evidence coming up throughout the years of him sitting on death row, and no one is giving him grace, or no one's giving him the just due that he deserves as an American citizen. So also being a journalist and being a reporter myself, I wanted to do more digging on Felicia Gale as well, because we also need to protect ourselves. We go out here, we utilize our First Amendment right, and some people don't necessarily agree with us and always understand, why we do our jobs and how we do our jobs and the way that we do our jobs. So when it comes down to, just her end of the spectrum, I wanted to understand a little bit more about that, just to put some context there. But for me, honestly, feel like it was definitely something that was not too shocking, again, because it was in the state of Missouri. And then to know that it went up to the Supreme Court, and in the Supreme Court decision, they literally said that it's a state's decision, and they don't want to get into it. There was a time where Sonia Sotomayor stepped in and asked for a pause. Ketanji Brown Jackson also asked for a pause, but nothing was actually done about it. And I think that there's more that could have been done from a federal standpoint to actually get involved. But, the federal government did not want to get involved with Governor Mike Parson. And I think that that is something that we as voters need to truly pay attention to in this upcoming election, right? Who are we putting in office? Who is making these decisions, specifically in these red states where Black and brown people live, where Black and brown immigrants are migrating to, and we want to make sure that they have the same level of respect and they're getting the same justice as everyone else. So this case, honestly, truly, I think it's a lesson, and it's a lot of talking points that can come from this, for the next generation of leaders to be able to do something about. Because Phil, I feel like the fact that we're still talking about executions, like literally taking people's lives, um, I don't think no human being should be responsible for that type of justice, in my opinion.
And let's stay there for a minute when you talk about the death penalty, right? I'm an abolitionist at heart. I do believe that the death penalty needs to be off the table for anybody, right? Whether you committed a crime or not, because it's the sheer idea. Number one, who am I to say that somebody's life should be taken?
Yeah.
Right, despite others taking people's lives, it's I that's a lot on me, right? When we talk about from a moral standpoint, but then when we start to look at the how flawed the justice system is, right? And when we say the justice system is flawed, it's the same idea that when it comes to this idea of government, and why I push back against this, or not push back, why I have questions even when it comes to this idea of governing. And I'm not going to, I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was Ayn Rand. I don't know if it was somebody else, but I remember Star. I don't know if you remember Star from Star and Buck Wild, but it's very
No, that's over my
problematic
head.
in certain regards. But I think he attributed this idea to Ayn Rand. It's when it comes to government, right? This idea of government is that people can't govern themselves, right? That people can't govern themselves. They're ungovernable. And
Mhm,
so what you do is you take somebody from this group who's not governable and ask them to govern. It seems contradictory
mhm.
to me, right? Because we're talking about people who have their own paradigms, their own way of thinking, their perceptions on how life are supposed to be, and now it's put onto others, right? And how just conflicting that can be. And when we look at when we relate that to just the justice system and the death penalty specifically, right? We have one person who says whether they're navigating grief.
Yeah,
Now here you have this family who's saying, well, listen, the evidence doesn't support it. Now you have some folk who saying, I don't care if the evidence supports it. I want justice.
yeah,
And I don't care who has to pay as a result of this. Y'all said he did it, then he did it. It's problematic in itself. Then when we start to look at, since the advent of DNA, and when we look at individuals who've been exonerated since 1970, you've had 190 people exonerated from crimes they were alleged to have committed, who were sitting on death row,
mhm,
who were later released. Now, I'm from the school of thought, well, one is too many. And if you have one where it says, well, you know what? Yeah, we know you ain't do it, then that's too many. And so here we have the seed of doubt that's planted, right? And that's all it takes is the seed of doubt. The seed, when we talk, and we got the shows like Reasonable Doubt, right? Because it has to be reasonable doubt that an individual committed a crime
yeah,
without a shadow of a doubt. And if there is any doubt, then you cannot find that individual guilty. But yet and still, here we have Marcellus Williams and so many other individuals, right? He's just the latest face on this problematic justice system where there's doubt. You don't hear me saying he's innocent. I don't know. Right? I based off with the information, the limited information that I have, yeah, it seems that he would be innocent. But I'm not even talking about innocence. I'm just talking about the difference between life and death.
Yeah.
And
Because
so for
even,
me,
I'm sorry.
this is again, this highlights the flaws in the justice system. What were you about to say?
I was just gonna just piggyback on what you were saying. I didn't want to cut you off, but even in the conversation specifically about just the stay on the execution, it's not him necessarily saying he wants to be released from prison. It's him saying, please don't execute me, please don't take my life. And we can actually work this out in the justice system as far as going back to court and revisiting everything that it has to offer as far as the new evidence and all the different appeals that he filed. So just knowing that they would not even stay on the execution was something that definitely took a lot of people's, I would say, it was a lot of turn of events for a lot of people, down to the fact where he had about over 100 to 150 people outside protesting, even the hour of him actually being, injected. So I think that that is something big that we also need to pay attention to, is that his attorneys, his team, was his family, his sons, right, were him himself was literally asking just to stay on the execution. And the fact that the governor, Missouri Supreme Court, nor did the United States Supreme Court feel the need to just stay on the execution. So I think that that's something also that made my eyes big, and as well as others, is the fact that they would not even revisit the case in order to give this man the justice he needed.
Yeah. Well, and when we talk about these stays of execution and what takes place, and there's so many people, you have the Innocence Project, you have the ACL, you have so many organizations, so many grassroots organizations, so many people who are unheralded, right? Who are doing this work, fighting for individuals who are, whether wrongfully convicted. I think of Maya Moore,
Yeah.
basketball legend. She might have went down as being the greatest basketball player, one of the greatest athletes, not only women's athletes, but athletes of all time.
Period.
She said, listen, I see what's happening, this injustice taking place with this brother who ended up being her husband later on, but I see what's happening here. And so I'm going to put it all on the line. She didn't have to, right? And she risked it all for her belief in true justice, in fairness, and specifically humanity, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about shared humanity amongst one another, right? Yes, and this is where folk who are abolitionists say this entire thing needs to be thrown away, throw the proverbial baby away with the bathwater as well, because all of this is rooted in extremely problematic white supremacist, capitalistic ideals that are detrimental to non-white people.
And laws and amendments that was created hundreds and hundreds of years ago.